Hello everyone, today I'll be reviewing North by Northwest. So North by Northwest came out in 1959 and it's directed by Alfred Hitchcock and it stars Cary Grant, Eva Marie Saint and James Mason, and this is often thought to be one of Alfred Hitchcock's most famous and greatest films. And in my opinion, I think it is his film which has aged the best. I think it still stands up very well today and is a very entertaining watch. So this is one of Alfred Hitchcock's films. Well, like a lot of Hitchcock films, it has lots of twists and turns along the way, and it constantly keeps us as the audience guessing and wanting to know exactly what is going on and what is going to happen next and where the story is going to lead. So at the start of the film, we see Cary Grant. He plays a character called Roger Thornhill, and Roger Thornhill is kidnapped by these two guys and taken to James Mason's character's house. James Mason plays a character called Philip Van Damme. And Philip Van Damme thinks that Thornhill is a different character called George Kaplan. Now, Thornhill, he doesn't know who Kaplan is, and neither do we as the audience. Philip Van Damme and his guys, they're trying to smuggle some microfilm as part of this scheme, as part of their secret scheme that they don't want the government to know about. What happens is George Kaplan is apparently this secret agent who is being controlled by the government to find out about Van Damme's schemes. So it is a little bit of a confusing story at first, but you shouldn't go into this film expecting to know exactly what is going on and expecting to understand everything, because we work things out as it goes along, and this is one of those films where it has certain things which we think we're supposed to understand and that we're expected to know more about. But actually, these things that we think we're supposed to know more about are actually not that important to the plot after all. Philip Van Damme's scheme to smuggle the microfilm really isn't actually that important. What is important is that Cary Grant's character, Roger Thornhill, he is constantly on the run throughout this film. He's running away from the bad guys, essentially. And this film was almost one big chase sequence. It's one big chase film where Thornhill, Cary Grant's character, is running away from these bad guys. That is what the focus of the story is, not on what Van Damme is doing. So we later get introduced to Eva Marie Saint's character, Eve Kendall, and this is a sequence when on a train. And Eve Kendall, she helps Thornhill escape in a few scenes. She sort of helps him out a bit with when they're on the run from the bad guys. Eve Kendall manages to seduce Thornhill, and we're almost thinking as the audience, what is going on here? Is she good or is she bad? There are lots of moments throughout this in the film of where cases of mistaken identity, when we're thinking we're not sure how to view a certain character and we're not sure whose side they're on. And Eve Kendall is really the main character that we think about this. Now, as we go throughout this film, there are lots of excellent sequences. One of the most iconic sequences is when there's a plane flying over the cornfield and it's a crop duster, so it's chasing towards Roger Thornhill, and Thornhill has to dive out of the way and hide in the cornfields. It actually inspired a similar scene in a James Bond film, From Russia with Love. Now, this film was often thought to be an inspiration for the James Bond films, and you can definitely see why, because this film definitely has a James Bondish feel to it, especially with Cary Grant playing a debonair, sophisticated type of character who is on the run from these bad guys. The only thing that makes it not seem like a James Bond film is the villains, I suppose. They're not particularly villainous in their schemes. I mean, they are bad guys. They are chasing after Thornhill, but they're not quite as menacing a villain as you would get in the James Bond films in the 60s and 70s, which came after this. I found this a really fun film to watch, a very entertaining film. There are so many sequences I've enjoyed. So there were the crop duster sequence, we get a sequence on Mount Rushmore, we get a sequence on a train, which is very good. And there's lots of these sequences dotted throughout the film, which break the film down very nicely. There are a few bits I don't like too much about this film. So there is a sequence where Thornhill is drugged by these guys, so he feels all tired and he gets in the car and is trying to drive away from them. And obviously because he's drugged, he's driving all over the place and he can't see properly. And in this sequence, it's supposed to be a very tense sequence, but unfortunately it's one of those scenes which uses a rear projection when they're driving. I don't know if you guys have seen those old films where there's someone driving a car and they're there's a rear projection behind them, so you can definitely tell they're actually not driving it. It's just a screen behind them, and it's quite distracting. It doesn't really work very well now looking at it. I know lots of old films have used this before, so I do forgive it, but unfortunately I don't particularly like that sequence. They also did use a sequence like that in Dr. No, the first James Bond film. That sort of reminded me of that sequence. But anyway, apart from that, really, most of the film is very entertaining and a must-watch for most people, I would say, definitely. I should also mention that the music in this film is done by Bernard Herrmann. Very good score, although not as good as some of the other Hitchcock films that he's done the score for, such as Vertigo and Psycho. So James Mason in this film as Philip Van Damme, he plays the role very well. Unfortunately, we don't see quite enough of him as I would like. So we only see him a few times throughout this film, and he plays it very well, but he doesn't come across as quite menacing enough. I actually think I prefer Martin Landau, Martin Landau's character. Martin Landau plays James Mason's henchman in this film, and he gets lots of good scenes, and he often comes across a bit more menacing. There's actually a scene where he seems quite superior to Philip Van Damme, and he almost seems more of a better villain in the film. But still, James Mason, very good actor, and he plays the role very well. I do like this film very much. I think it's a very entertaining Hitchcock film. I'm really a big fan of Alfred Hitchcock as a director, and I think this is definitely one of his best films. Hitchcock has done so many great films that I wouldn't say this is his best film, but it's definitely one of his best films, probably in his top 3 or 4 greatest films. And that is definitely a compliment because most of his films are excellent. So overall, I'm going to give North by Northwest a rating of 9 out of 10. I think it's definitely worth a look if it sounds like your kind of thing. So there we go. So that is North by Northwest. So what do you guys think? Have you seen it? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Please let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.